All right. We are now reconvened in open session. We will now consider action on closed session items. Mrs. James,
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. I move that the Board of Trustees, pursuant to Board Policy FNG Local, assign the Level 3 grievance appeal of Justin Thomas to Richard Hightower, who will serve as the Board's designated hearing officer.
Second.
we have a motion by Mrs. James and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Mrs. Haliger. You don't have one?
Do the activity reports now. It's on the agenda.
All right. Next up. Excuse me. Next up are board member reports. We initially, Mrs. Kristen Tossan was going to give a report on was it the governance, or what was it, vision and planning?
Governance.
Yeah, the governance committee. But as she's not here, I didn't say this earlier, but Kristen her father had a surgery this morning, so she's on her way back right now from Louisiana. Everything went well, but she needed to spend time with her family, so we wanted to, I mentioned this earlier, but we have our thoughts and our prayers with them and their family, so. Activity report.
Okay. We
Sure.
attended the Chamber of Commerce Fort Bend ISD presentation, Vision and Planning Committee meeting, Policy Committee meeting, yeah. First day of school at many schools, Go Public Gulf Coast Steering Committee, Fort Bend ISD Education Foundation Golf Tournament, mentoring at Kristen McAuliffe Middle School, SHAC meeting, Student Leadership 101 opening session, bond sessions, Board Leadership Academy opening retreat, and Sugar Mill Elementary open house. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. As I mentioned, we will not be having any other special reports this evening, as Mrs. Tossan had intended to do such, but she's not here. We will now consider our consent agenda. Does anyone want to remove any items from the consent agenda?
11A3.
Yes, Mr. Burdine, we'd like to remove item 11A3.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. James. We will now, or may I have a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the consent agenda in its entirety with the one exception of 11A3 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. James.
Discussion.
Do we have discussion?
I just have one point on C1. I appreciate the data that we got on the truancy over the history over the past couple of years. We really hadn't seen that since Christy Whitbeck presented that when our numbers were going the opposite. So I'm glad to see that they've turned around. So that's good. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Please vote. Motion passes. We will now consider item 11A3. Do we have discussion?
No, I have a
I'm
motion.
sorry. May I have a motion?
yes. I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 1.32 cents, which is effectively a 1.51% increase in the total tax rate.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Helger and a second by Mrs. James. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. We don't have any action items this evening, so review future board meeting agenda items, Dr. Dupree.
Yes, sir. At the October meeting, we're going to be bringing to the board's attention for consideration district improvement plan and campus improvement plan performance objectives. We'll also be bringing educational specs for all levels. We'll be doing the full report on that work, as well as an overview of the attendance boundary planning process, three major elements. There'll be several items related to possible action, including an architectural design for Lakeview Elementary rebuild, budget amendment, and the staff retention supplement that we mentioned at the last meeting. And then there's several other items coming up in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Dupree. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
A motion by Mrs. Haliger and a second by Mrs. James. Meeting is adjourned.